Welcome to the HR Dialogues, a show where we talk about HR and the future of work. I'm your host, Dr. Dieter Veldsman, and today I'm joined by a very exciting friend of mine, Ryan Hopkins. Welcome to the HR Dialogues, where we learn from people practitioners as they navigate the emerging world of work. Ryan, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. It's been a long time coming.
I know. I'm so glad we are finally able to get the opportunity to sit down and talk about a topic that you are very passionate about in terms of wellness and well-being and what's currently happening in the world. Ryan, tell us a little bit about yourself.
My name is Ryan Hopkins, and myself and Dieter both go to the same barber. But when we're not getting all our hair chopped off, I'm the best-selling author of 52 Weeks of Wellbeing, a no-nonsense guide, which is getting republished in 6 languages at the moment. So we're doing a tour across the Middle East soon, which I'm really excited about. I'm the Chief Impact Officer at JAAQ, in charge of analysing, maximising, communicating our impact to the world. And in my opinion, it's the coolest mental health platform on the planet, and why I left leading Deloitte's Future of Wellbeing consultancy, the consultancy business I built there. I'm the strategic wellbeing leader at Bupa. Found out at 31 I'm autistic, which makes sense because if I've ever seen a number or a study, I remember it. And that way I'm able to talk about wellbeing objectively, which creates space for the subjective. And I'm proud to have positively influenced the lives of like 1.3 million people directly with my work now. And we're just getting started. I intend to engage 1 billion. I love it. It's my life's work.
No, that's very inspiring and it's absolutely fantastic. And I can definitely recommend your book. I've seen you speak live as well. So for anybody listening to this, if you do see Ryan on the circuit somewhere, please do reach out to him. It's definitely worth your while. Ryan, best career advice that you've ever received. What would you say?
I think rather than advice, at Deloitte and other places like that, you almost expected to have a personal brand, which is anything but, and you have to look and sound like a consultant, which is charged out at an incredibly high day rate. And I found it really difficult there to assimilate. I'm a former failed electrician where I broke my leg, and bouncer, and I play rugby, I'm covered in tattoos. I felt like a bit of an odd sausage, and rather than the best career advice, it was rather a question. It was like, what can I do to help you be your best here? And he just said, like, however you want to turn up, that's cool by me. Like, you got a bit rough around the edges, whatever, we'll find ways for you to thrive here. And it's more like it was what he could do for me, and understanding that I didn't need to change to fit in with everyone else. And I tried my best for years to look and sound and talk like the people who were better educated than myself and could read eloquently with beautiful prose, whereas I'm a bit like, all right, how's it going? You know what I mean? but I love this subject, and I remember things that others can't, and I've learned now to stop trying to be like others and fit into the mold of the usual, right? Whereas you start to embrace all your quirks, intricacies, and differences, and you lean into that. It's a beautiful place, and you step on the stage and be completely congruent with who you are, and that was from that manager who supported me to really lean into that.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's such good advice, right? And I think it's fantastic, this whole idea, and we are going to touch on it today as well. I think where authenticity is and being genuine has become such a big topic in a world that is increasingly, I think, filled with pretense and filled with things that just don't make sense. Ryan, we're going to talk about well-being, and specifically, I want to talk about what's happening in the well-being space. It feels to me, and this is just my perception, so I would love your view on it. You know, I think post-pandemic, everybody spoke about it, was top of mind. It kind of feels like we are still dealing with a global well-being crisis, but it's not spoken about enough, in terms of my view at least. So would love your thoughts a bit on what's currently happening in the well-being market. What is the conversation at the moment?
Everyone was like, when we were lucky enough to keep our jobs, if we weren't furloughed, they were given an app or some form of support during the pandemic, during that collective trauma. I think that everyone went through. We were the same. We were outside clapping for the NHS. We were doing these things. We were in it together. You had those like Teams calls and stuff for everyone checking in, and that collective, the cohesiveness and that sense of community, even when remote then, was higher than it's probably ever been. And as a result, things were launched with really good feelings and good intent from organizations, apps and meditation apps and everything else. And they were on 2-year deal cycles. So we saw a big drop off in 22, another big one in 24. I think people are struggling to come back from that again now. And you go to the benefits conferences And it's all changed a little bit. So instead of like support in your pocket, it's rather like what AI can do for you. And if you're looking in the world, every single one of the stands that I saw and walked past, all AI enabled. So I was saying, what's the problem we're trying to fix? Is your product, because it's AI enabled, going to deal with the fact if you work on a laptop that you're distracted every 2 minutes, according to Microsoft and their latest Future of Work report? No.
Yeah.
One additional thing that's trying to distract you and take away that attention. It takes 25 minutes to get into a state of focus, and we're distracted every 2 minutes. So the maths ain't mathsing, you know what I mean? And like, it just doesn't, it isn't adding up, and we have little to no time to focus on the things that we need to be our best self. And outside of work, we spend our time relaxing on screens. And if you don't work on screens, then you relax on your evening with 3 screens, watching TV, on your laptop, and texting your mates.
Yeah.
Until we deal with that side of the bargain, if you think about the workplace, the deal of dual accountability, it's not an organization's responsibility to improve happiness. And that's where we get it wrong, and we get stuck with the apps and stuff. But it is their responsibility not to worsen it. And when we flip that switch, we stop looking at the individual and giving them shiny things to do, and actually look at the workplace itself and say, how can we let the smart humans, hopefully, that we've recruited, if you've got a hard, decent recruitment process, which I assume you do as you're paying them every month, to do the job that they were brought in to do with the minimal amount of distractions and get them to leave. How many people can work outcome focused rather than inputs? How many people are able to work in a place where they're not distracted every 2 seconds? And then also when you contribute to purposeful work rather than increasingly transactional work, when you're just working as an interface on a machine. And then finally, we're pushing everyone back into the office. So we're losing that flexibility that was hard won during the pandemic. And I'm yet to see a rationale or a return to office mandate that's got one piece of quantitative data rather than we want to pull people back for creativity. And until we start to do that work and take health and well-being seriously and treat it like a function of a business, like a profit center, which it can be when considered properly, and the analytics are right, then that's not going to change.
But I think there's, a couple of great things that you've mentioned there that I want to double click on a little bit. I think the first one is, I think a lot of these apps, I'm also a firm supporter and believer that they have to form part of a bigger ecosystem. Then I think they work really well, but they are one part of the puzzle. They are not going to be the silver bullet that changes absolutely everything. I speak to clients and I ask them, what's your wellbeing strategy? And they say, no, we have this platform. And I'm like, wellbeing is not a platform. That's a channel that you're utilizing for some support, and it's important.
But it is a platform.
And I mean, it touches on the second point you make around that. A lot of it is about the culture and the mindset we have in the business. And, I've often also mentioned to say, I think people can work remotely. I'm not sure everybody's got the confidence to lead remotely, because a lot of the comeback to the office pieces has got much more to do with the leaders' insecurities and the way that they manage teams as opposed to the individual actually doing the work.
Productivity paranoia.
Spot on, right? And then it's also speaking to what is our definition of productivity, because I think that's a massive problem. We still define productivity in the old way. Exactly, right? And all of that then plays in. And I love your comment on the digital overwhelm, because I think we are living in a world where people feel increasingly more overwhelmed than what they did in the past. They are struggling to make sense of what's happening to them and the impacts. And, I blame public media a little bit for this in terms of, by 2030, AI is going to take 1 billion jobs. That's not a realistic narrative around what's really happening in the world. And I think that creates anxiety, which, I can imagine you see on a day-to-day basis.
Mate, 100%. There was something I was reading 2 days ago from the Knowledge Project with Shane Parrish, a very good newsletter and podcast. It was about the garbage theory of the workplace. Yeah. And essentially, excuse my swear, but like in, out. You have rubbish data in. You can have really smart individuals who are able to produce quality outcomes, but they're working in a system that's frenetic, that you have to jump through gates that make no sense to get something done to push the clients. Seth Godin says you got to ship something, do it quick. That works for small companies, but we've layers and rings and rings and rings around stuff. And we're doing things in process because we have to. And if you put an AI system on top of that, you're optimizing the wrong things. You almost have to completely forget the business in its current way of working. And it's my opinion, in a few years, if you just redid the business, the biggest contributor to well-being at work would be the IT function, not the HR team if you work on laptops. If you get that right, you all know that an apple's better than a packet of crisps. Getting off your butt's better than sitting on it. Calling a loved one's better than being stuck in Teams calls all day. It's like, it isn't rocket science, but we have to rethink about how we deliver the work and actually challenge historic notions of what a work day looks like as well. And if we do that, get outcome focused, I promise you that'll be some enlightened organization. and I'm as bad as the next person, right? I understand all this stuff. I
Yeah.
can talk about all the analytics that need doing, but am I any better? No, because my system is configured against me.
You get so caught up a little bit with the rhythm and routine and the hooks that, I mean, a lot of these companies build in to get you engaged and get you coming back to the platform. And I think there's a very big ethical question there as well, right, in terms of what is healthy and what is not. I want to talk a little bit, because I think there is the elephant in the room at the moment around also the part that, I find in the AI conversation at the moment. There's almost two camps, right? People either talk about it's Armageddon, it's the end of the world, or people talk about it's the greatest thing ever since steam has been invented in the second industrial revolution. I think we don't talk about and I'm just going to label it for our conversation, the dark side of techno stress that's starting to rise. We're seeing this fear of being obsolete in future that people are grappling with. And, through the lens of the work that you do around well-being.
Yeah, so I was actually writing on this a couple of weeks ago, and I really enjoyed putting this together. It's super interesting. I think back to when I started as a fresh-faced Deloitte graduate many moons ago. I was the oldest graduate, but I was still fresher faced than I am now. I was in 5 days a week, agonizing over my suit and tie combo. I had like 3. And then I was sitting in sessions and I was writing notes and I was cataloging stuff and I was organizing bits. So your project management basics, essentials, you're doing the tiny bits of lifting that you can do for people. None of that is done by people when they enter the workforce now in an increasingly remote world.
Yeah.
I'm so fortunate that I got to learn by osmosis, right? Sitting next to people, seeing the mistakes they made, picking up tiny nuggets of wisdom and how they talk about stuff on a call, synthesizing huge data sets and like conversations and making actions make sense. People don't do that. That's gone.
No,
that's gone so fast. That's a bygone era. You join a business now, Gemini takes your notes, or any other, or Otter, or whatever else is you use, right? So that's done. So there's no taking that thought in a conversation, synthesizing it, and making it make sense. I would have to go home and spend my evenings Googling what Kubernetes means. But now I'm able to take information, sit on a call, have a conversation with someone, think about themes as I talk to you now, and synthesize it quickly. We live outside of the screen for a lot of people who are working on it, and they're not going to develop the ability for that critical thought. And there was a study, I think the name's Natalia Klemenska, I think it was, MIT. You have to check me on that. I'll share it with you. You can share it with people if you want in the notes. And they had 3 groups. They essentially asked them to do the SATs in the US. That's a practice.
Yeah.
You had a brain-only group, a Google search group, and a ChatGPT group. The brain-only group saw the highest brainwave frequency, were proud of themselves, their FA, had the most originality. The ChatGPT group, then they asked them to do it again and again. And essentially by the end, they were just copy and pasting. They get lazier and lazier every time they bang it out. Then they asked them to flip it around. So the brain group got to use ChatGPT to augment what they've written before. And the ChatGPT group then had to use their brain. The original ChatGPT group couldn't remember any of the concepts because they committed nothing to deep memory, essentially. Yep. And then the group that were able to then augment and improve saw huge improvements and continue brain stimulation. So it's not that we can't use the tools, it's the sequencing. And it's these little things across everything that are making a huge impact. But so you think of this like the little changes that happen everywhere, little process being augmented. There was a study of 300,000 Danish workers who essentially integrated a version of a chatbot into their business. And they found that the organizational improvement of integrating those chatbots across 300,000 workers and hundreds of organizations was less than 1%. It's garbage theory. So while it help us do little tasks at an organizational level, we are absolutely miles off. So I'm like, while I'm AI positive, I'm AI rationalist. Is it fundamentally going to change everything we do? I don't know. Because if you haven't changed the business itself or how it's constituted and how people work within it, it's not going to change.
Yeah, and it comes back to my point earlier around, I think there's an ecosystem that you need to change for these things to really work. I completely agree with you. And I mean, I love the study you quoted. There was another complementary study that also spoke about the fact that depending on in which sequence you utilize it, you either take ownership of the work and you are proud of what you've done, or on the other side, exactly like you've mentioned, you actually had no idea what you did. You were almost just a cog that moved things along, that prompted things to kind of shift and to move. And I think for me, there's 2 big risks, right? The one is I definitely worry about the next generation gap in terms of what's going to happen with people not learning those hard lessons. Early in my career, I got the advice from somebody to say, I don't have enough battle scars yet, to really be able to do certain things. And I thought at the time, this
yeah,
old man is
whatever.
speaking absolute nonsense. 10 years on, I was like, I think that's one of the best things anybody's ever told me, because it wasn't my skill level. It was the exposure and the experience and that sense making piece
Exposure.
around
Exposure is,
getting there. Yeah.
mate, 100%. And if you're not in the meetings as a junior, if you're not able to spend time with the notes and you're jumping
Yeah.
from one thing to another, you don't have the capacity of ChatGPT. You're not going to pick stuff up, right? You're not going to pick memory. And there was additionally worrisome stat this week in the FT, or just late last week. Grad roles in the UK have dropped by about 66% since the launching of ChatGPT. And they say that's particularly prominent in the UK. We haven't seen a precipitous drop off as much in Mexico, India, or perhaps where things are being offshored to. So you've got cost of talent in the UK hasn't changed. Inflation has been strong, driving salaries, whereas things are being offshored, and then also a lot of historic roles, or like a lot of the tasks that are being performed, are being sourced out elsewhere. So you think, how are we going to bridge that gap? It's a real challenge, and you think the workplace is, it's different from when I started, and it wasn't a crazy amount of time ago, and you think, it's going to look in 5, 10, 15 years time. It's going to be a very, very interesting journey. I'm excited to sit back on the pod in 15 years to see where we'll be, but it's hard to know, isn't it?
I think we've fallen into a culture of faster, better, more. I love sometimes when you go into target and goal setting at an organization, right? We say we want to achieve X. Now we've proved we could do it this year. Why does next year need to be 10% more, 20% more, 30% more, 40% more? At what stage do you kind of break that muscle too much that the organization no longer has the capacity to achieve more? I want to come back a little bit into your point on, we are seeing a workforce that is fundamentally changing, and there's a lot of like cognitive load, I think, at the moment, because people need to, I think there's a new tool every single day. There's an implementation here. There's a new story here. There's a new stat that comes out. And then I think it has got an emotional load and kind of emotional toll as well, in terms of people's general sense of, sentiment, happiness, anxiety, towards that.
I want to go back to your point on like short-term measures and driving for that success. And as I think about the individual and the two types of well-being, think about Aristotelian ethics. You've got hedonic well-being and eudaimonic well-being. And hedonic well-being is caused almost by quick external stimulus, something, a glass of wine, some chocolate, achieving something, buying a car. Think about the workplace. Put that organizational hedonic drivers, which will be the financial reward, etc. Then if you flip and you put that eudaimonic hat on it, eudaimonic well-being for an individual is something deeper. It's like that deep sense of purpose. It's having a difficult goal and working towards it. It's doing something in service of others. For me, it's the difference between happiness and joy. Happiness is externally stimulated and it's emotion that's temporary, whereas joy is something deeper and sustaining and will get you through difficult times. He who has a why can deal with any how, one of Nietzsche's quotes, right? If you think about the workplace and about an organization that's going to sustain and last over time, it would be one that has a eudaimonic purpose for individual well-being hats on top of the organization, and one where people are working for something greater. And what people are looking for now, particularly Gen Z, with the vast majority of them saying that purpose is as important as anything else in the business, is to contribute to something greater than themselves. And while they're seen as woke, demanding, struggling more than ever, whatever, they are absolutely aware and not willing to eat it like other generations were. And how amazing is that, right? That they want to challenge the organization they work for, do something good in society.
Yeah.
And for me, if you can flip that switch and you can get people bought into like a eudaimonic purpose of the organization, you could challenge them and say that's naive, that all businesses are built to make money. And yes, they are. There's no reason you can't have an organization that doesn't make change and feeds people at the same time. They need to do the same, otherwise the business doesn't exist. So when you think about setting that purpose and getting people bought into that vision and getting them to work through that, for me, what else do you need as a business? You're willing to roll your sleeves up and get it done if you know you're working in something greater than yourself. So that works with the organizational purpose perspective. We're all aligned.
I think purpose is also very misunderstood in organizations. I think people have this idea that, because, in my view, purpose almost exists at 3 different levels, right? There's the level of me, my purpose, how I contribute. I think there's the purpose of I belong to something that contributes bigger to what I do. And then I think there's the macro level that we contribute something to the greater good. And I think if organizations kind of look at it that way, I think there is a reality. Organizations need to exist, so they need to make money, they need to be profitable, but there's ways of getting there. And your second point really on, I think we need to also roll it back slightly and understand who the human beings are in our workplace and what is important to them. I'm still a major fan of, if you start thinking really about the human experience at work, you start thinking very differently about what people really want and need from work and where work fits into their lives. And I think then you can start having a much more realistic, holistic conversation about work-life fit. I think work-life balance for me is a challenge because I think people immediately then have trade-offs and compromises to make, where I think work-life fit is a different decision that you make around what is the setup going to be for you in your context, and what that means.
But that's where I'd start, honestly. Think about the temporal, the geographic, and the modal flexibility of the work compared to the belonging. And it often exists on the spectrum for me. So you've got belonging versus flexibility. It's often a payoff between the two. If you push a fully remote, you will lose that sense of cohesion. However, so you've got like physical location, completely remote, in person, and you've got that sense of belonging. But you can have 5 days in the office and a low sense of belonging at the same time. That's almost,
Of course.
we see in a lot of organizations. I presented that concept, so it's like the hybrid payoff.
Yeah, spot on. I always think, every decision that you make is excluding someone. And are you aware of that? And I mean, there's some major studies about the forgotten workforce and the hidden workforce of exactly people due to certain parameters that organizations put in place. And I think, that's where the HR audience can play such a critical influencing role to say, remember, if we make this decision in this way, we are excluding the following people and shrinking the workforce and the available talent pool in particular ways.
So you have to do the work. I think, what does this cohort of people need to be their best selves? And it probably isn't going to be 5 days in. It probably isn't going to be completely remote. There, as you say, there are payoffs to every single group. And I found with one organization I was working with, voluntary attrition for new joiners during the pandemic was 3 times higher than it was previous, because people joined, they couldn't connect, they couldn't get business, they couldn't learn perhaps, and they were off out. As soon as £2,000 came over the table for a new joiner, they had no sense of connection to that business. They're out. I don't blame them. So as you say, you've always got to think about those payoffs. But often we go into it with like that willful ignorance that this is the way forwards without considering what the change is going to be. But because the analytics are not done, 1% of companies in the UK do any form of measurement, any objective measurement of their wellbeing assessment. So they use qualitative feedback, subjective opinions, focus groups, a few nice comments on all hands to measure the effectiveness of their work. You wouldn't treat a sales function like that, would you? But they're not helping themselves by not doing the assessment or the really basic stuff it just seems a bit boring. It's easy to turn up and do the nice feeling sessions, but unless we treat it differently, it's not going to change. And stuff's going to be automated around all this well-being stuff, leaving less and less space for what's important.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, I think the analytics and the data-driven approach, to your point, I think it helps us carve through assumptions, and I think it helps us make much more informed decisions about where we spend the little investment that we sometimes have that is available, and do it to its maximum impact in the context within which the human beings work and what they actually need and require. Ryan, I want to start wrapping up for us, but there's a couple of things that really stood out for me in our conversation, and I really want to thank you for sharing those tidbits again. I think definitely on the one side that, wellness and well-being is still a massive thing we need to talk about in organizations, and we are not getting it right. I love the point that you made around us focusing a lot more on the analytics and focusing a lot more on the data-driven solutions there. Your comments around it's about purpose and how we create purpose for people to create belonging, and doing that in a particular context and understanding what that means pertaining to flexibility and autonomy and giving people choice over their time. We spoke about the impact on being digitally overwhelmed and how AI can play a role there on both the positive side or the negative side if we don't guide and steer that in the right direction. Ryan, last question from my side. Any advice to HR professionals listening today that's busy with their well-being strategies? If there's one thing that you would love them to think about, what would that be?
I've worked in HR. I worked with many HR function organizations. It's a lonely place that can feel quite siloed a lot of the time, like they're the gatekeepers and arbiters of a lot of what's going on in the business. It would be to open up and try and create cross-functional teams. The most impact I've ever had in an organization was when I led the future of work function. It was actually a function. And we were IT, real estate and HR. And we were delivering the hybrid strategy completely in lockstep.
Where can people follow you and also get a copy of your book?
52 weeks of wellbeing and no nonsense guide available on Amazon and everywhere else, really. If you want to catch up with me, LinkedIn is probably best, or trying to really do the newsletter now. And I've found that a name offline, and that wasn't actually taken, which I'm amazed with. So we're going to be taking it offline. So if you fancy that, you'll find that on Substack as well. But hit me up on LinkedIn. That's probably best.
Absolutely fantastic. Ryan, thank you very, very much. And for everybody joining us for this episode, thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next episode of the HR Dialogues. Bye-bye.